It became apparent the last couple of days from Florida camp that Miami may not have to face Montrell Johnson, who's one of the best running backs in the SEC. He's doubtful, but we shall see over the next couple of weeks. It is possible that he could suit up against the Canes. So that's going to be a defensive line situation there, of course, as Miami takes on running games throughout the ACC and Florida to start. So let's go to D-line. And any positions or key backup spots that need to be determined there, Brad?
There's a few. I mean, when you're talking about the defensive line, this is going to be by far probably our deepest room on the football team. And that's saying a lot because I just talked about how deep our running back, wide receiver room, and I didn't even talk about the tight end room and what I expect that to be this year, along with the offensive line, 8 to 9 guys I talked about. But this D-line group, Mark, is unbelievable. And well, the craziest part about this is all the guys that you expected to already have buzz about in the fall, they have buzz. But the crazy thing is the more buzz you're hearing from the defensive line group are actually from the guys that we expected to either fall off or just back down. And that's not happening, right? Guys like Anthony Campbell. This is a young man who's 6'7", came from a smaller program, didn't even hear his name at all last year. He's probably one of the biggest guys, biggest units on the football team, and he is really showcasing himself all throughout fall camp. He is a guy. He's not one of the youngest guys on the team, so he brings some veteran leadership as well. But he's a guy that's hungry. And when you talk about the interior defensive line group, I mean, you brought in guys like Simeon Barrow, Marley Cook, C.J. Clark to pair with your Justin Scott, Artavius Jones, and Ahmad Moten and others, right? And I was very skeptical on where this guy in Campbell was going to fit, if he would even, crack a rotation. But he's doing more than that, Mark. He is right there with the second team, even sometime getting first team reps at times. But this is going to be a defensive line group where it really doesn't matter who gets the nod, first team or second team. This is going to be a group by committee at all times. You're going to see guys rotating all throughout the football game, whether it's, late second quarter going into halftime or late in the fourth quarter when it gets down to crunch time. Mario Cristobal has been very clear in interviews where that's where he wants to bring guys that have high motor and have a lot of energy. And that's where that D-line group is really going to come in. You're going to have guys like Marquise Lightfoot, Cole McConaughey, Malik Bryant, Elijah Alston that are going to be able to come in situations, Booker Pickett, Elias Rudolph. And that doesn't even, bring up the Ruben Baines and Akeem Ezador. Mark, Akeem Ezador is a guy that came off of injury, didn't play at all in the spring because he was waiting on a new cleat that had to be custom made for his foot. Came back in fall camp, and he's been one of probably the highest upside and the most impactful guy on the defensive side of the ball, at least on the D-line so far throughout fall camp, has probably been Akeem Ezador. So you like what you hear from a guy like that who's very hungry and motivated to get back with this team and really make a stamp like he did his first year at the University of Miami. So when you compare a guy like Ruben Bain with Akeem Ezador and a Tyler Barron, Elijah Alston, and others, this defensive line group is going to be tremendously deep, Mark. So I'm not really too worried about who starts. There's a lot of different packages that we're going to use all throughout the football season, especially with that defensive line group, the NASCAR package and others. It's going to be fun to watch. I'm very sorry for all the offensive tackles and offensive line and quarterbacks that are going to be facing this defensive line all throughout the football season. And it's going to start week 1 against Florida. And man, that offensive line in Florida, not only am I not worried about that offensive line group, but those are guys that have maneuvered all different position groups. They've never played together in the same position group. And I can't wait to see this defensive line eat.
Okay, well, that's going to make things easier for guys like Francisco Mauanoa, who led the team with 62 tackles last year. Let's not shortchange him. 82 tackles. And they lose the next 3 tacklers. Wesley Basaint factors into the linebacking core as well. How do you feel about the linebackers?
Again, another group that's really just taking it to another level. You mentioned Kiko Manoa, who was one of our guys to go to ACC Media Day. Obviously, our leading tackler from last season didn't play in spring camp, similar to his brother Francis, but they're back out there in fall, looking great as always. But Wesley, you mentioned Wesley Bassing out of Miami Central in his third year. This is definitely the year where, everything's going to have to click for Wesley, because if it doesn't, we have other guys that we've brought in from other programs and also other guys that are really just taking a next step up that are ready to take that spot. And I think it's very key for a guy like Wesley to put on more weight and to really start to mold into a true linebacker. I mean, I think you're starting to see that in fall camp. He's really put on some good weight where he's starting to form and look like a true linebacker, what you're looking for. And he's really doing all the right things. I think he's a guy that he has to be a sure tackler. He's got to be at the right places at the right time and be utilized in different ways. And we have a lot of different linebackers that we're going to be putting in different scenarios. Jalen Alderman, who I mentioned at the beginning of the show, transferred from Louisville, who was probably one of Louisville's best linebackers last year. We ended up snagging him along with the linebackers coach, bringing him to Miami. And Alderman is definitely going to be in the rotation, especially in passing game. You also got guys like Popo, Raul Aguero, that is really stepping up. He's a guy that's a true sophomore and is ready to take that step. So I expect him to be in a role at time. And Chase Smith. Chase Smith has been at this program for 4+ years, has been battling injuries all throughout his career, and he's finally healthy. He's a guy that, if he could put it all together, I expect him to make some noise as well, not only in the linebacker room, but also on special teams. And then, of course, you got a young incoming freshman in Cameron Bobby Pruitt out of the state of Alabama that can be utilized in so many different ways. And he's just got the talent and the mindset, and he's very hungry, and his football IQ is through the roof, who's a guy that can just be thrown in different scenarios, and you don't really have to worry about him too much. He's a guy that's going to be also making his stamp in that linebacker room as well.
Okay, Brad, now we get to the position that I would think, unless you correct me on this one, probably needs the most work. 3 incoming transfers, of course. Michelle Powell at the safety spot, mixing up the corners and safeties, but Michelle Powell played a ton of football, championship level football at Washington. Deanna Hill incoming from Marshall. So sort out the corners and safeties for us and your hope that they improve and who could really step up.
Again, the same way I talked about the interior defensive line group or defensive line in general, it's starting to how I'm starting to get the same buzz with the cornerback room, right? We brought in guys from other programs and we expected them to be those guys that we're hearing the buzz from, or just the guys that from last year that are still here. We expect them to do what they do best. But it's actually been other guys as well that we want to improve that we really haven't seen much from in the last couple of years. A guy like Robert Stafford, who's been at this program for a couple of years now. He is a guy that all the lights are starting to turn on for him. He's a guy that can be utilized not only in the cornerback room, but also in special teams. He's a tremendous athlete. When the ball's in the air, not only can he go up and get it, but then he could also take it to the house. He's a true ball hawk and a great football IQ. And I think he just needed everything to come together. And he's starting to really click. And he's a guy that's really stepped up throughout fall camp is Robert Stafford. So I like what I hear from Robert Stafford, along with the guys that, have already been here and done their job. Guys like Daryl Porter, Jedias Richard, and then you also had Mish Powell, like you mentioned, right? I think between those guys and Damari Brown playing most of the slot and nickel for the University of Miami, I think that's going to be mostly your rotation for the cornerback room. Deanna Hill, transfer from Marshall, got a nice little pick in his first couple practices in a Miami Hurricane uniform. So you'd like to hear about that. But I think the safety room is going to be the more intriguing spot for me in the secondary. We already know about Mish Powell and, of course, Jaden Harris, who is really going to have to be that guy to step up, not only on the field, but also off the field. Going to have to be a lot more vocal and be that leader in the room, which I expect him to be, and also make a transition to really be a guy heavily relied on in that back room in the secondary when we do have the ability to move Mish Powell in the slot to give us our best mix of guys back there. But besides them, I think the only other guy that I've been hearing a lot of buzz from is probably Markeith Williams. Markeith and Zaquan Patterson are both guys that have really been making a name for themselves throughout fall camp as well. Zaquan, being a true freshman from Chaminade Madonna, is really just a tremendous football player and athlete, and is really just taking that next step to be a guy that can be thrown into the mix. And then you also got a few other guys. Markeith Williams, like I said, he's a guy that is probably going to be in there for more passing down situations. He hasn't put in enough weight on, in my in my opinion, to be put in the running game at times. But he's a guy that, again, is stepping up, another ball hawk. And when the ball's in the air, he's going to go up and at least try to make a play. So I like what I've been hearing from Markeith Williams, and even a guy like Taylor, Jason Taylor's son. Even though he was a guy that transferred from Arizona and had some good college snaps over at that program, he's a guy that's starting to make a name for himself and make some big plays in fall camp as well. So that's what you like to see, right? You want to get a good mix of some of these true freshmen that have only been in the program for a month or two to really showcase the talent they got and show that, they belong to be on a D1 Green Tree football field with the rest of these other guys that you brought in from transfers from other big time programs that have already showcased what they can do. When you get a good mixture of the two, all it does is elevate the guys that you already have in the program that have been in there for 2 or 3 years. And what you want is them to hope for them to blossom finally. And you're seeing that with guys like Anthony Campbell, Robert Stafford, and a few other guys. So that's what you like to see.
Of course, this defense took a pretty sizable jump in production in regards to most of the metrics from 2022 to 2023. We can look at Lance Guidry and what he brings to the table, the talent upgrades, kind of the combination of the two. How would you rate Lance Guidry's abilities, his skill set, what he brings to the table, and why he's effective?
Yeah, I'll say this. I mean, Lance Guidry, out of the two coordinators we have, Dawson and Guidry, I think Guidry has been doing an excellent job compared to Dawson. Not throwing any shade at Dawson, but I just think Guidry, with the pieces he's had, being able to rotate a lot of guys, especially last year, the defensive line group, we were falling apart very quickly with injuries. And besides Ruben Bain, you didn't really have other guys to really work with or step up. And I thought we put our offense in positions at times to really get the job done and at least get away with a victory. And unfortunately, that didn't happen a lot of the times. And I do think at times when Guidry would make the right calls on defense, unfortunately, we did have a few guys that, as big as their names were, they were very, abysmal at times where we relied on them and they didn't make the right plays at the right times. And it really hurt us in the secondary. And I think we're going to be playing a lot safer, and it's a good thing. I don't think you're going to have guys that are going to play a lot of hero ball this year. I think it's going to be more a collective group, which is what you're going to want. And then we have superheroes and Avengers all throughout the football team. So I can't wait to see how it all gets together. But again, this is the first time that Miami has had both coordinators back in 2 years. So I think that alone, you're going to see a huge improvement in not only the defense, but also the offense. And Shannon Dawson, even though I expected him to do more with the offense last year, the jump he made from 2 years ago to this past year, I mean, we were still a top 30, 35 offense in the country, and we left a lot of points on the board with a quarterback that was very mediocre. So I expect this to make another jump and hopefully be a top 10 offense this year.